Okay, delving more into your time in Japan,
Sure.
what about sights or sightseeing? Did you go around the different areas of Japan? Did you have time? Because considering you mentioned overtime, and how often did you go through overtime?
Well, not to say overtime is a bad thing, you know. For me personally, I actually didn't think negatively about overtime because I needed to do the work, to finish the work before the deadline. And as long as I would be properly compensated, I didn't think that having to do overtime, despite how long it was going to be, was necessarily a bad thing. So, in terms of what I was doing, again, it depended on whether I had a deadline or not. But there were days where I would come home 12 a.m.
Because you were in the office for like 7 hours extra.
Yeah, like I would start work from 8 in the morning all the way up to 12.
Wow.
Sometimes when the work finished, that was the time I would have dinner. And like, so basically 12 o'clock, I run to the, I stop work because I have to run to the train since that's going to be the last train already. And if I don't take that train, I'll be stuck unless I take a taxi. Now, I would do overtime from, let's say, like, so 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. Next day I go again 8 a.m. But again, it varied and it depended on whether there was a deadline. So for me, I think I had the chance to explore Japan in the weekends because as much as possible, I really tried not to have work interfere with my personal time during those 2 days so I could recharge. And honestly speaking, back then, there was this sort of mindset of mine to want to really focus on doing something productive. So there were, let's say, 5 years of my life, my first 5 years in Japan, where during the weekends, I just chose to simply recharge, chose to simply try to save as much money as I could.
So you just stayed in, you just slept.
Exactly. But later on,
Hibernate.
yes, that's right. But later on, I realized that this was doing me no good because I was living in such a great country, in such a beautiful country. And up to that point, I still wasn't able to explore or see what Japan had to offer. And so that's where I sort of built up my hobby of doing photography. And eventually, with enough support from other organizations, I decided to make my photography into something freelance. So basically, I would take pictures for certain tour organizations or certain agencies. They would send me to this faraway place or province.
So was this a side hustle? And did you
Yes.
also earn extra for this?
Yeah, it was more of a sort of per project basis sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't really interfere with my work. And basically, they would just send me to, let's say, a province in Japan that no one knows. Let's say Nagano, or let's say Sado, or Aomori for that matter. And I would go there, I'd go to the landscape, take a good picture, sell it to them, and our business was concluded. So that was the sort of freelance I did. Of course, with photography, I've expanded that to portraits, maternity shoots, weddings, and I suppose that having that aspect now be a part of my enjoyment was able to let me work through my concern that I needed to do something productive in the weekends. And that's how I was able to do the sightseeing, as you were saying.
When did you begin your journey with photography? Was it something you were always passionate about, or did you just happen to get interested much later? How did that begin?
Well, for me, actually, and again, honestly speaking, I never really had that hobby or that photographer's eye way back in college, high school, even grade school, you know. And for me, let's say if I wanted to take a picture of something, I just take a picture with the cell phone, with a digital camera, and be done with it, you know. But I think that it was through my experience of being in such a beautiful place that sort of inspired me to want to really capture the essence of that beauty and translate it or share it with people around the world. And so I think I started that hobby around 2015. So it's been a couple of years since then.
So what else do you take photos of? Anything, scenery, weddings, or you do like people also?
Right. So basically, for my hobby personally, I do a lot of landscapes. And aside from that, from a freelance perspective, I, let's say, take pictures for tour organizations and give them those pictures so they can use in posters, advertisements. Talking about it from the more professional aspect, we have portrait shots, basically for, let's say, shots used in the studio, or let's say headshots, group shots, outdoor shoots.
So you do it professionally and you do it out of passion also.
Yes,
So
yes.
both.
Yes.
And you sell them, so you also monetize in that sense.
Yes.
Do you join competitions or?
I used to in Japan. When I came back here to the Philippines, I wasn't as active. So right now, really, in the Philippines, I still do my freelance photography aside from my translation and interpretation work. But it's more that I'm focused on the jobs and less on the competitions. Just recently, I did this interior design shoot for basically some restaurants that just opened up. And so that's also something that I try to do aside from the weddings and landscapes.
Anything else you want to venture in that you haven't?
In
terms of photography.
In terms of photography, I've always been wanting to try different styles of photography. And talking about it from a more professional standpoint, I want to venture out into videography sooner or later. This is just sharing from personal experience again. During COVID, or rather before COVID hit, I actually had this dream to be a vlogger. And so...
What type of vlogger? More on
Travel.
travels, food?
Both,
Both,
yeah.
generally.
And so what I did during that time was, I still remember it very clearly. I said to myself, 2019, December, I was going to start on it. So I went to the DJI store. That's the one that sells the what do you call it, the mini cameras as well as the drones. I went there. I forced myself to buy a sort of pocket camera. It's called a DJI Osmo Pocket. Literally, you can put it in your pocket, take it out, and then turn it on and just do vlogging, regardless of where you are. And it also had a stabilizer, so you can run and it would still be good. But and I did start doing some videos already in a YouTube channel, but then COVID hit, and so
then push through.
yeah.
But maybe now you can slowly get into that.
I don't know. I mean, if perhaps I could get the proper support, I realized that it is tough. It is difficult, especially if you're a one-man team, in the sense that you're holding the camera and you have to think about what you want to say.
I think it's best if it comes off natural, because I've actually interacted with some bloggers.
Yes.
They do it because they enjoy it. So everything came natural to them. The editing, the content creation.
Right.
It just comes and it just flows. So.
Exactly. So I think maybe right now, I could definitely explore the vlogging route, but perhaps I'd like to learn and I'd like to grow in the aspect of videography, like taking those SDE, same-day edit videos that the weddings have.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
It is.
Okay. Anyway, going back to Japanese culture,
Yes.
work,
Yes.
because I've always been curious.
Yes, yes.
I hear a lot often about harakiri, like when the pressure is really on,
Yeah, yeah.
they just tend to like end their life, or you read about it.
Yes.
Is that an accurate perception, that since people are so pressured at work or they fail at a certain thing, for Japanese they usually pick that route? of, not being able to face the shame?
It's a very valid question, and unfortunately, it's one of the most common problems in Japan right now. Now, just to give a little sort of explanation, harakiri in Japanese. So we know that as basically like killing oneself,
Yeah,
right?
suicide.
But, loosely translated or literally translated, hara is stomach, kiri is cut.
Ah.
So you cut open your stomach to show what's inside you. So when you talk about it on that aspect, yes, it can pertain to suicide, but perhaps it's more of trying to show that you are a clean person or a pure person. Now, there is another terminology for suicide in Japan, and that is called jisatsu. Like ji is literally you or myself, and satsu is to kill. So I think that's perhaps the thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
And suicide in Japan is
it prevalent?
Yes. Unfortunately, it is very prevalent. I don't recall my facts, but if I'm not mistaken, I think that once every day there is a suicide in Tokyo.
What do you think leads to that? Is it emptiness? Is it failures in the workplace? Is it depression? That's usually because of the pressures, like people can't cope enough?
There are, I think, a variety of factors. And I think that the situation, as you said, is that perhaps for some people, the pressures of work are too much and they don't want to continue on because of the pressure, the strain, the difficulty, and the consequences.
But how is it perceived? Is it viewed as honorable to kill yourself there, that, oh, you picked that route because it was the higher thing to do? Is it perceived that way, or is it frowned upon?
It's again, this is talking from personal experience, but it's a mixed bag.
Mixed.
With, let's say, government officials, if they do jisatsu, right? Like,
it's honorable. Like, what if someone was, his corruption was exposed and he kills himself? Is that viewed in a positive light or negative light? Oh, like, at least he had the honor of ending his life because of what he did.
Some people,
as opposed to, he couldn't face the challenges, how weak or how cowardly. It can be perceived both ways. It can be viewed positively or negatively.
Negatively, true. Some people, as you just said, would really perceive that as an honorable thing. Other people would prefer that they sort of face the music and face the imprisonment, because that could in itself be a worse punishment, because you have to try to atone for what you did. But from another perspective, actually, and again, this is such a sad situation. One of the common jisatsu methods is not to like kill yourself in the house. No, it is to jump in front of the train while it's moving.
That's the usual.
That's the usual
occurrence in Japan.
Yes,
the subway.
Yeah, and that's why you can basically see some signs. Maybe you've also noticed that probably, like in those trains, for example, that you have, let's say, it's written in both Japanese and English, like human-related accident, jinshin jiko, okay? And you might be thinking, human-related accident, what does that mean? Like maybe my t-shirt got stuck into the train while it closed, or maybe like, my hand accidentally got, stuck in the train. But that mostly corresponds to suicide. And
but it's listed as suicide in the statistics, or is it not part of the count because it's deemed something else, that it was an accident, whereas it was actually suicide?
I'm not too sure about the statistics for that, but generally speaking, when we hear jinshin jiko as a common person, we'd associate that to suicide, because nobody in their common mind would just try to jump in the train willingly. And here's the sad thing, because suicide, again, happens for a variety of reasons. And it's either the pressures, or maybe because they have such a tough time in their personal lives, or maybe because they feel that nobody cares about them. And honestly speaking, I understand, because I've lived alone. I've felt feelings of
loneliness, depression, or feeling down. not being
inadequate.
able to connect socially, interact.
Yes, and so it's really hard for them, you know, to try to connect with the outside world. And when you're in that mindset, you know, anything becomes possible. Like negative things become possible because of that mindset. But here's the thing, and here's the ironic thing. So you do suicide, right? And basically, like, you'd expect that sort of like everyone pities you, or like kind of like everyone grieves together with the family that loses their son or their kid. But it's the opposite. Because you know what happens if they, and this is what I understand, right? Or what I heard, that basically once they identify who you are, of course they can't penalize you anymore because you've passed away. They'll penalize your parents or your family or the next of kin because you caused a public disruption. The train has to stop for 30 minutes. So that
Alright.
they,
So, madamay pa your parents
exactly,
in a way.
exactly. And it's frustrating
For adding to some hassle that you caused, so your parents have to be dragged into it.
Yeah, yeah. And yes, it is a hassle, of course, for a lot of people because, you know, they have appointments, they need to go places.
It's true, yeah.
And you
It's
know,
a disruption.
you delay the train for 30 minutes, that's a big deal in
Because they have to
Japan.
clean up the mess. I
Right.
think maybe it would exceed the
30 minutes,
30
yeah.
minutes for sure,
Depending-
cleaning up all that
Condition,
blood and whatever.
the situation, right?
Yeah.
So it's really hard to think what the situation is, if they're in the right or they're in the wrong, because again, suicide is no laughing matter. People die for a reason. But again, on the other perspective, it seems like the system there it's penalizing people for being under that condition. And so if we want to try to help people that are in that thought process, there must be something else that we can do, you know.
So is there enough being done regarding that in Japan, or people just do their thing? Is there enough awareness in that aspect?
Unfortunately, I'm not too sure about how active the government or the NGOs are in terms of curbing that sort of thing. But I think that what we can do perhaps as regular citizens is, you know, if you see a colleague or you see a friend that's just struggling, having a tough day, you know, maybe just check up on them once in a while, say, hey, Tanaka-san, are you doing okay? Like, if you want, like, we can always drink sometime, you know, just hang out.
Yeah, try to connect, no?
Yeah. I think that's what we can do, you know.
Okay, deep subject.
Yeah, who would have thought, right?